Hello and welcome! Today we're going to dive into those high school staples, the standardized college entrance exams, brought to us by our friends at the College Board, better known as the SAT and the ACT tests. And tell you what, there is a lot to talk about here. I mean, let's face it, a good score on these tests can literally unlock the admissions door for homeschoolers, especially at public universities where they may not be very interested in deciphering homeschool transcripts. And speaking of transcripts, I'll be making a video soon about what does and doesn't work, but for now, we will acknowledge that a high SAT or ACT score opens a lot of doors. So first, we're going to take a quick look at the format used by each of these tests and how that influences which test your child should take. And hey, we'll even decide whether your child should take one of these tests at all. Next, we'll get the straight scoop on the changes coming to the SAT this year. These are big, seriously, because they could definitely result in colleges clearly preferring one test over another. And then, saving the best for last, I'm going to share some great tips that will help your team prepare for these tests. Hey, and along the way, we're gonna bust some prep myths that everyone seems to buy into without any actual evidence that they work. Why? I don't know. And speaking of evidence that something works, if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss a single new Homeschool University video. So let's get started and open the door to the mysterious world of success on those college entrance exams. Believe it or not, what you know is just as important as how the test determines what you know. Yeah, in other words, a test's format affects how well we are able to apply what we know to the questions we have to answer. When we look at the ACT and the SAT tests, this way, using this filter, there are some key factors to think about. So let's take a look at the SAT first. This one feels
really long
because it allows the most time per question, up to 83 seconds. That is almost a minute and a half to answer a single multiple choice, or as I like to call them, multiple guess question. And guess what? Everything on the SAT is multiple guess. While this sounds great, on the downside, this can be exhausting because you have so much time to change your mind and second guess every single answer. And here's a couple of other things that are important to note. First, the math section on the SAT has both calculator and no calculator questions, which can be a bit freaky for the calculator dependent, but it makes up for this with mostly straight up algebra questions. Very little geometry and trig thrown in. The SAT's format then is great for someone who is minimally math savvy and likes to take their own sweet time, but it can drive your "let me just get done" kid crazy. My oldest child took the SAT and hated it because it was boring. Okay, now let's look at the ACT. This test moves right along lickety-split. I mean, you're getting less than a minute for every question, so you really have to stick by your first choice answer. Not a lot of time to psych yourself out, which is a huge plus for someone like me who tends to overthink everything. Now, most of the questions are multiple guess, just like in the SAT, but they do throw in a few math problems that have to be solved on a grid. It has a science reasoning section, which would be code for logic skills, that the SAT doesn't, and all the math questions allow a calculator. The math, by the way, has a fair number of trig and geometry questions, along with the expected algebra, so you have been forewarned. The ACT's format is actually less intimidating than the SAT for many kids because it doesn't drag on and allow the brain to doze off. My kids definitely prefer this one over the SAT. So let's sum up this formatting stuff, right? SAT, slower pace, better for kids that get anxious about time constraints and maybe didn't get past algebra. Then there's the ACT, faster pace, better for kids that tend to drift mentally or overthink everything and have strong reasoning skills. Bottom line here, either test is fine. It really all just comes down to how your teen reacts to the test formats. And we're going to get more into that in just a minute. But let's answer a last question in this section, which is, should every teen take one of these tests? And the answer is a great, big, gigantic no. If your child is not planning on attending college, why would they take a college entrance exam? Now, I can hear some of you saying,
well, maybe they don't want to go now, but what about in the future?
Well, I look at this from a purely practical point of view. Most kids graduate from high school like age 17 or 18, right? Suppose they take 2 or 3 years to decide about college. Now they're 20 and, fingers crossed, have been working and living on their own. And if they're considering college, most likely they're going to start with a community college because time and money. And guess what? Your local community college doesn't base admissions on ACT, SAT scores because basically they welcome everyone and just sort them by ability with their own testing. So then, after taking those community college classes, your child's acceptance into that four-year university is now based on his or her college transcript. And that ACT or SAT score becomes a big nothing burger. So unless you really believe that your child is A, going to live at home and do nothing while he thinks about college, and B, would dive right into a four-year program as an independent 20-year-old, then taking the SAT or the ACT is not a necessary option. Go through the hassle of taking these tests only if your child is moving directly from high school to university. So back to assuming that your teen is indeed taking the test, let's get the scoop on the changes coming to the current SAT. It's February of 2021, and COVID has drastically impacted the world, including standardized testing. As in, it's all been on hold like for a while, right? Interesting side note, because of all these lockdown delays, some colleges are now reverting to what used to be the norm, using their own entrance exams for admissions instead of relying on these third-party tests from the College Board. But getting back on topic here, the SAT is undergoing what I can only call simplification. According to the College Board, these changes are to, quote, simplify our work, as if that's a concern of ours, right? And reduce demands on beleaguered students, end quote. Basically, the two most challenging parts of the SAT are being eliminated, and these would be subject matter tests and the optional essay section. So subject matter tests have always been optional. They're single subject tests, right, that cover an area not included in the primary test. Things like world history and physics. Now, some colleges have suggested or even required these supplementary tests to gain admission for certain majors. However, the thinking is now that advanced placement, those AP courses, that they cover that base because they are subject specific and they have their own testing. Hey, that one makes sense. But the other change being made is a little less transparent. The optional essay is going bye-bye, and in my humble opinion, it's because kids are no longer being taught how to write in most schools. And why test what isn't in the school toolbox, right? So now keep in mind, these changes only relate to the SAT. At this time, the ACT has announced a big 0 changes in the works. This could mean that those colleges that still want to see a writing score would be opting to favor the ACT over the SAT. So we'll see how this all shakes out, but in the meantime, here's a really exciting change that's being considered. Remote proctoring. Yay! This would make it possible for kids to take the test at home rather than in a testing center. I'm just saying, this would be a huge game changer for many kids, especially homeschoolers, because it takes the external anxiety factor pretty much down to basement level. I mean, no longer sitting in some big funky classroom with 50 strangers. That would really chip away at the old intimidation block, especially if your kid normally does all his work at the kitchen table. And now, what we've all been waiting for, test prep tips and a few myths busted. So we're going to start with my 3 favorite top totally unsubstantiated myths. Myth number 1, test prep classes. Okay, you absolutely do not need a test prep class to score well. We'll talk about prep steps in a minute, but you have no reason to pay someone to help your child. If your child didn't need group classroom instruction to get through high school, they certainly don't need it now. This one will not produce a better score, just an empty spot in your wallet. So moving on here, let's go to myth number 2. Practice makes perfect. Practice is good, but taking the test every year beginning in junior high is not helpful. I mean, clearly not. Think about this. These tests are designed to measure the knowledge your child soaked up in the high school years. If you're taking the test without getting through the expected material, you're going to score poorly. And that low score could be just enough to convince your child's subconscious self that he's really not smart or capable enough for college. And that would be a crime, seriously. Okay, this brings us to myth number 3. The PSAT is a must. Okay, I get it. This one is related to eligibility for the National Merit Scholarship. But if you think this through, there's not much on the plus side here. Your child would be taking a dumbed down version of the SAT in the fall of 11th grade, all to qualify for a $2,500 scholarship. Did I say that's a one-time scholarship, not every year? And did I mention that only the top 1% of PSATers qualify even for consideration? And out of those, only about half actually get the money. Let's see, that would be like about 1.6 million kids taking the test and 7,500 getting the actual scholarship. Meanwhile, your kid gets either a false sense of security from a good score, remember, this is a dumber version, or a crushing blow from a bad score. Remember, we're talking junior, not senior year here. Side note, colleges do not consider the PSAT in their admissions. And while we're at it, side note, ignore all the PSAT variations. That would be the PSAT 8, 9, and 10, because they're just progressively dumber, shorter versions and serve no purpose other than to empty your wallet. Okay, so we covered the myths, out with the bad, in with the good. Here we go with those test prep tips that work. These tips started with my own kids and have been passed along to lots of families, producing unbelievable success rates. By the way, just as a matter of record, I have 3 kids who graduated from our homeschool. One was sure he wasn't going to college and didn't take either test. The other two did take the ACT, and they scored 31 and a 32 out of a perfect 36 using these methods. Now, my oldest son, the only one who actually did go on to college, took both the ACT and the SAT. His SAT score was meh, but his ACT score easily landed him a full ride scholarship at his first choice, a prestigious private university. Like I said before, the format matters. So here we go. Tip number 1, the never fail 4-step program. Step number 1, go to your bookstore and buy a current year test strategy book. The reason is this: success on these tests depends a whole lot more on being familiar with the test format and a whole lot less about having superior knowledge. So let me just illustrate this here. I've got a couple books that my youngest son used a few years ago. The first one here is an ACT prep book that I really recommend. I hope they still publish these, because this is a great book. Up Your Score ACT. But I want to give you just a little hint here so you can see what I mean about strategy. Look what's on the cover. Proven strategies for acing the test while keeping your sanity intact. Or how about how to outsmart the ACT, okay? This is not cramming everything you need to know into your child, but rather, yes, there's that information, but it's about how to take the test. Little things like, what kind of questions can you expect? How long should you take with each question? That sort of thing, giving you a chance to read what the instructions are going to look like so you don't have to waste time doing that. These books are fabulous. And this one, I just got to show you this because it's so much fun. This is the kind of thing that's in here. This is why kids love it. The English test, like that annoying uncle who corrects everything you say. I love that. Seriously. So that's one. This one, I just want to show you this one. This is by Kaplan. Kaplan makes a lot of these. Seriously. This is the ACT strategies for super busy students, okay? Effective time management tips. Proven score raising strategies. 15 simple steps to tackle the ACT while keeping your life together. These are invaluable. You're going to use them a whole bunch. Your child's going to go completely through one or two of these books before they ever do anything else, which is leading us to step number 2, which I need another book for. And we're at step number 2. Okay, so after your child reads through the test guides, you're going to have them take a practice test, like on paper with that wonderful number 2 pencil, okay? And where are you going to get your tests from? A book like this. This is actually put out by the College Board. The Real ACT Prep Guide. You will always find these for both ACT and SAT. The cool thing about this is contained in this big old thick book are 5 actual ACT tests. 5 of them with, of course, complete answer keys. This is going to be super important in this section, okay? So you're going to take a test out of here. You're going to have your child using the same timed format that he'll have in the actual test. And you're going to try to simulate the test experience, like a quiet room with only mom or dad in the room to act as the test proctor, okay? Once your child's done with the test, you're going to score it, and you're going to look for any areas that are markedly low, okay? Then you're going to have your teen go back and reread the sections of that, I like to hold this one up, of that test strategy guide that apply to those sections, right? So the sections of the book that apply to the sections of the test that we're dealing with. Expect this to take a couple of days, yeah. Then take another practice test. If those same sections are still a problem, you're going to go on to step number 3, which is coming. If the scores came up or there were no real low spots to start with, you're going to move on to step 4. But for right now, we're going to go to step 3. We're going to assume that there's some review that's needed. And so what we have here is better known as the review cram. Yeah, it's apparent At this point, that your teen has a couple of blank spots in the information memory banks. So you're going to help fill that in by zeroing in on what exactly is missing and then guiding a review of those specific topics. Okay, so start with the test strategy guide. Okay, remember our guide, just had it, because that's going to review all of the concepts that are being tested. It's going to be a really easy way to figure out, okay, where are we lacking here exactly? After whatever review your kid's going to do at this stage, then you have him correct the wrong answers from his 2 pre-tests. Now, if he still doesn't get it, he's still getting those answers wrong, you're going to have to dig into review a little deeper. But eventually, as long as it isn't a topic he's never studied before, the review will take hold and you can move on to step number 4, which is where we're at now. Step 4, going to wait 1 week. You're going to take 1 more pre-test, but this time take it at a different location, hopefully someplace less familiar, okay? Your local library is great for this. They usually have a private room you can use, and this gives your teen a chance to deal with external jitters, okay? Now, how long does this all take? Well, anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, depending on the review that's needed to square away step number 3. But that's it. One of my kids did a week process of review. The other one did 2 weeks. That was all that was needed. It was just brushing up on a couple things. Even if you have a lot to square away, again, not more than a month. So what I'm saying to you, listen carefully, 1 little month of prep and voila, that's it. You're done. And you're welcome. Okay, so that was tip number 1, the 4-step program, all right? Now we're going to go to tip number 2, and that one would be, hey, don't rush this. I said earlier that these tests are meant to measure what your child has learned, as in past tense, like what was learned before now. Knowing this, why would you start this process any time before senior year? September to November of senior year is the perfect window to take these tests in, since most college admission deadlines are in the spring, which leaves plenty of time to reschedule a test date if something comes up and you have to change it, okay? Some colleges have rolling admissions, which means you can apply anytime, and you can put off taking that test right up into the spring of senior year. Now, a few schools will dangle a really pretty little carrot called early admissions, okay? If the college is super competitive, as in they have a lot of applicants and they only take a few students, early admissions might be a thing for your teen, because then you'll be bypassing the regular spring application gridlock, which means the admissions office will have more time to really look at the extra pieces in your child's homeschool transcript. So if this is an option for your child, great. Take the test in the spring of junior year, but no sooner. All right, that's tip number 2. Let's go to tip number 3, which would be plan B, as in you need to have one. If your kid does really poorly on the first pre-test, try switching tests. In other words, if the ACT was just a total disaster, try the SAT, and vice versa. If that doesn't help, go for another pre-test, but this time sit with your child and talk through each section with him as he works through it. And don't time anything, okay? If his score improves, then you need to talk through what he thought helped him and then build on that, okay? If nothing changes, talk through how he's feeling when he takes the test. Feeling stressed or uncertain can cause, total brain freeze, and that has to be worked with. Now, maybe you have one of those kids that just can't get into the test groove. So, the point? Hey, this is not a cause for panic. Just have him enroll in the my brain froze for a minute. Have him enroll in the local community college and bypass the stupid tests altogether with an actual college transcript. This will not affect your teen's chances at any other school, and it's actually a plus for homeschoolers because it confirms they can handle college level work. So that was 3. Let's go on to tip number 4, okay? This one is really simple. If the college doesn't ask for it, don't take it. Seriously. Unless the essay is required for admissions, why put your teen through the torture of a timed essay test? However, if it is necessary, that study guide that you used for the 4-step program is going to be your child's best friend. The essay section is the most difficult, not because it's the hardest part, but because writing evaluation is highly subjective. I know, I teach writing. Your teen's only hope is to have a memorized writing formula that guarantees he will include the must-have framework points. Now, remember, this is not Creative Writing 101. This is timed writing to answer a prompt, and it isn't meant to wax poetic. Have your child practice writing using the exact framework set out in the study guide. Oh yeah, and I'm sorry, keep your fingers crossed. What can I say? All right, and now we've got tip number 5. Yeah, we're going to take just a little detour here because I can't resist throwing this into the mix. College is a very expensive waste of time unless your child requires it to pursue a specific career choice. Case in point, my oldest son wanted to be a mechanical engineer. You can't do that without a 4-year college degree, so he went off and got the degree. It made sense. Tell you what, if you think that sending your teen off to that university campus without a plan is going to help him or her, oh yeah, figure it out, prepare to be disappointed. I know lots and lots of kids who made it to campus, incurred a couple of years of a lovely student debt, and then figured out that what they really wanted to do had nothing to do with a college degree. Tell you what, if your child has no idea what he wants to be when he grows up, steer him into the world of work and let him figure it out there while being useful and productive, and a real plus, making bank for the future. Hey, just saying. So at this point, I'm really hoping that you no longer need that paper bag you've been hyperventilating into. Look at it this way. You spent years stuffing information into your child's every nook and cranny, and now all of that work is about to pay off. So instead of dreading these exams, think of them as just another opportunity. But, and this is a biggie, do not consider this the end-all, do-or-die moment in your teen's life. Low ACT and SAT scores do not equal failure, and conversely, high scores do not equal success. I'm sorry, it's just a freaking test. It's not life. Repeat that to yourself as often as you need to. It's just not that important because it's not life. That's right. So, on that happy note, thanks so much for allowing me to join you on this crazy journey we call homeschooling. And now I want you to go out there and teach like your hair's on fire, but in a practical, purposeful, positive way. You can do this even in the high school years because you are amazing.
Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day.